Winner number 1. Jack Whittaker, $315 million. Curse, 2002. Jack Whittaker was already a successful businessman in West Virginia who owned a construction company worth $17 million when he bought a Powerball ticket on Christmas Day 2002. He was not desperate for money or struggling financially, but he enjoyed playing the lottery occasionally for fun. On Christmas morning 2002, his ticket matched all 6 numbers, making him the winner of the largest single jackpot in American lottery history, at that time worth $315 million. Jack chose to take the lump sum payment of $113 million after taxes instead of annual installments over 30 years. He seemed like the perfect lottery winner because he already understood business and money management from running his successful company. Jack immediately announced plans to donate 10% to Christian charities and build churches in West Virginia. He appeared generous and responsible during his first press conferences. But the massive publicity from winning the biggest jackpot ever made Jack an instant celebrity and target. Within weeks, strangers were approaching him, constantly asking for money. He began carrying huge amounts of cash everywhere he went, sometimes having over $500,000 in his vehicle at one time. Jack started frequenting strip clubs and casinos, where he would spend tens of thousands of dollars in single nights. In August 2003, thieves broke into his car while it was parked at a strip club and stole $500,000 in cash that Jack had left sitting in a briefcase on the seat. Police questioned why anyone would leave that much money unattended in a vehicle. Jack claimed he often carried large sums because people constantly asked him for money, and he liked being able to help immediately. The constant requests for money and attention began affecting Jack's judgment and behavior. He was arrested twice for drunk driving and once for threatening a bar manager. His marriage started falling apart as his wife complained that Jack was drinking heavily and spending all his time in casinos and strip clubs. The man who seemed stable and successful before winning was becoming increasingly reckless and self-destructive. Then the real tragedies began hitting Jack's family directly. In July 2004, his 17-year-old granddaughter Brandy was found dead from a drug overdose. Jack had been giving Brandy large amounts of cash and buying her expensive things. Friends said the sudden wealth and attention destroyed Brandy, who became addicted to drugs and surrounded by people who only wanted her money. Jack blamed himself for his granddaughter's death. 3 months after Brandy died, Jack's daughter Ginger also died from unknown causes that were never fully explained publicly. Within 2 years of winning the lottery, Jack had lost both his granddaughter and his daughter. His marriage to his wife Jewel ended in divorce. Former friends and employees began suing Jack, claiming he owed them money or had made promises he did not keep. One former business partner sued, claiming Jack promised him a share of the winnings. Multiple strip club employees filed lawsuits claiming Jack harassed them or failed to pay promised gifts. Legal fees began adding up to millions of dollars. Caesars Atlantic City Casino sued Jack for $1.5 million in bounced checks from gambling debts. The man who won $315 million was writing bad checks within a few years. By 2007, Jack admitted in interviews that he wished he had torn up the winning ticket. He said the money ruined his life and destroyed his family. He lost more than he ever gained from the jackpot. Jack's construction business collapsed because he stopped paying attention to running it properly. Employees sued for unpaid wages and benefits. In 2009, a woman who had been in a relationship with Jack sued him, claiming he gave her promises of money and cars that he never delivered. The lawsuits kept coming from every direction, draining whatever money Jack had left. His lawyers estimated he had spent or lost over $100 million within the first few years, mostly through gambling, legal fees, and theft. Jack became a recluse, hiding from the constant parade of people, demanding money and filing lawsuits. His health deteriorated from years of heavy drinking and stress. The generous charitable donations he promised in the beginning mostly never materialized because his money disappeared so quickly. Churches in West Virginia that expected major gifts received nothing as Jack's fortune evaporated. By 2016, Jack Whittaker had lost everything, including his family, his marriage, his business, his health, and his entire $315 million fortune. He died in 2020 at age 72, having spent his final years in poverty and isolation. The man who won the biggest lottery jackpot in history ended up with nothing but regret and tragic memories. Jack's story became the most famous cautionary tale about lottery winners, proving that even experienced businessmen can be destroyed by sudden massive wealth and the attention it brings. Winner number 2. Evelyn Adams, double winner, 1985 to 1986. Evelyn Adams beat odds of 1 in 17 trillion by doing something almost impossible. She won the New Jersey lottery not once but twice in consecutive years. In 1985, Evelyn won $4 million. Then, incredibly, in 1986, she won again, taking home another $1.4 million. Her total winnings of $5.4 million made her briefly famous as the luckiest woman in America who had won the lottery twice. Evelyn was working in a convenience store when she won both times and had been playing the lottery regularly for years. When she won the first time, she was thrilled and planned to use the money to retire early and live comfortably. Winning the second time seemed like proof that she was blessed with incredible luck that would last forever. Evelyn believed she had a special gift for picking winning numbers. But Evelyn had a problem that she did not recognize as dangerous. She loved gambling and spent much of her free time in Atlantic City casinos playing slot machines. After winning the first jackpot, Evelyn began visiting casinos more frequently because she now had money to gamble with, and she believed her lucky streak would continue at the slot machines just like it had with lottery tickets. The first million disappeared quickly as Evelyn gave money to family members and friends who suddenly needed her help with various problems. She bought a new house and expensive cars. She took trips to Las Vegas and spent weeks gambling. Evelyn started playing higher-stakes slot machines, betting hundreds of dollars per spin instead of the quarters she used to play. When the second lottery win came in 1986, Evelyn saw it as confirmation that she was blessed and that gambling was her destiny. Instead of being more careful with the second jackpot, she became even more reckless. She began spending entire days in Atlantic City casinos, often gambling away tens of thousands of dollars in single sessions at the slot machines. Evelyn convinced herself that her winning streak would eventually return at the casinos, just like it had twice with the lottery. Every time she lost money, she would tell herself that the big win was coming soon, and she just needed to keep playing. This is the classic gambling addiction mindset where losses are seen as temporary setbacks before the inevitable huge win that will make everything worthwhile. Friends and family members noticed that Evelyn was gambling compulsively, but she refused to listen to concerns. She insisted that she knew what she was doing and that her luck would turn around. Evelyn began borrowing money from relatives to fund more casino trips after losing her own cash. She took out loans using her lottery annuity payments as collateral. By 1990, Evelyn had gambled away millions of dollars at Atlantic City casinos. She had nothing to show for her lottery wins except debt and broken relationships with family members who felt used. Evelyn moved from her nice house into a trailer park. She stopped paying bills, and creditors began calling, constantly demanding payment. In 2001, Evelyn gave an interview admitting that she had gambled away her entire $5.4 million fortune at slot machines in Atlantic City. She was living in a trailer and working again at low-wage jobs to survive. Evelyn said she wished she had never won the lottery because it enabled her gambling addiction to spiral completely out of control. The casinos had treated Evelyn like a VIP when she was winning and spending freely. They gave her free rooms and meals and drinks. They encouraged her to keep gambling by making her feel special. But once her money was gone, the casinos stopped caring, and Evelyn was left with nothing but regret and addiction. Evelyn tried to warn other lottery winners not to gamble with their winnings. She became a cautionary example used by gambling addiction counselors. Her story appeared in psychology textbooks as a case study of how even the luckiest person in the world can destroy themselves through compulsive gambling when they have unlimited money to feed the addiction. The woman who beat 1 in 17 trillion odds by winning the lottery twice ended up with less than she started with before winning anything. Evelyn lost not just the $5.4 million, but also her relationships, her dignity, and years of her life to slot machines. She spent her later years living modestly and trying to rebuild her life from the financial and emotional devastation. Evelyn Adams proved that incredible luck can become a curse when combined with addiction and poor judgment. Winning twice should have set her up for life, but instead gave her the resources to destroy herself. Her double lottery win became a double tragedy that showed how gambling addiction can defeat even the luckiest person alive. The casinos in Atlantic City took everything Evelyn won and left her with nothing but memories of what she once had and threw away. Winner number 3. William Bud Post, $16.2 million, Nightmare, 1988. William Bud Post was living on disability payments of $400 per month when he won $16.2 million in the Pennsylvania lottery in 1988. He was barely surviving in poverty when his winning ticket transformed him overnight into a multimillionaire. Bud thought his financial struggles were over forever, and that he could finally live the comfortable life he always dreamed about. Within weeks of winning, Bud was overwhelmed by people demanding money. Friends he had not spoken to in years suddenly called claiming they needed urgent help with medical bills or rent. Strangers showed up at his door with business proposals and investment opportunities. Bud had never handled significant money before and did not know how to say no to the constant requests. Bud's own family became his worst enemies almost immediately. His brother Jeffrey hired a hitman to kill Bud, hoping to inherit the lottery winnings. The murder plot was discovered by police before it could be carried out, and Jeffrey was arrested and convicted. Bud had to testify against his own brother in court and deal with the knowledge that his sibling literally wanted him dead for the money. Meanwhile, Bud's landlady Ann Karpick sued him, claiming they had a verbal agreement to split any lottery winnings since they bought tickets together. Bud insisted he bought the winning ticket alone, but Karpick convinced a court that she was entitled to 1/3 of the jackpot. Bud was forced to give millions to his former landlady in a legal settlement that he bitterly resented. Bud started spending money recklessly on things he did not need or understand. He bought a mansion, expensive cars, a twin-engine airplane, even though he did not have a pilot's license, and a restaurant. None of these purchases were good investments. The mansion was too expensive to maintain. The cars depreciated immediately. The airplane sat unused. The restaurant lost money every month and eventually failed completely. Within 2 years, Bud was millions of dollars in debt, despite winning $16 million. He had taken out loans using his future lottery payments as collateral and spent the borrowed money on more bad investments and gifts to people who manipulated him. Bud trusted the wrong people repeatedly and signed contracts without reading them or understanding what he was agreeing to. By 1991, Bud had filed for bankruptcy protection listing debts that exceeded his remaining lottery payments. He owed money to dozens of creditors, including the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue, for unpaid taxes. Bud had spent millions, but forgotten to pay the government their share. The tax bills plus penalties and interest were enormous. Bud's legal problems escalated when he was arrested for assault for shooting a gun over the head of a bill collector who came to his house demanding payment. Bud claimed he was defending his property, but the court saw it as threatening violence against someone trying to collect legitimate debt. Bud was convicted and sentenced to probation, plus fines he could not afford to pay. In 1993, Bud was convicted of threatening a man he owed money to and sentenced to prison. He served time behind bars as a convicted felon while still technically being a lottery millionaire with future payments coming. The absurdity of being in prison while receiving lottery checks highlighted how completely Bud had mismanaged his winnings. After his release from prison, Bud continued making terrible decisions. He married a woman who spent his money freely and then divorced him, taking a settlement in the divorce. Bud's health deteriorated from the stress and poor lifestyle choices. He developed multiple medical problems that required expensive treatment he could no longer afford despite once having millions. By 2000, Bud Post was living on disability and food stamps again, just like before he won the lottery. His $16 million jackpot was completely gone, consumed by debts, legal fees, failed investments, and manipulative people who took advantage of him. Bud sold his future lottery payment rights to a company for a fraction of their value because he was desperate for immediate cash. In interviews late in his life, Bud said he wished he had torn up the winning ticket. He claimed the money destroyed his family, cost him his freedom when he went to prison, and turned him into a target for criminals and con artists. Bud said he was happier living in poverty before winning than he was dealing with all the problems the jackpot created. Jack Whittaker in business suit, standing confidently in front of his construction company, $17 million net worth sign visible, established businessman with office building, successful entrepreneur before lottery, stable professional life, West Virginia setting, animated cartoon style with clean line art, warm cinematic lighting, soft shading, and a polished storybook-inspired aesthetic. Muted color palette with cozy atmospheric tones similar to modern Western animation. Vintage-inspired props and environments, illustrated with expressive but non-realistic details. Do not include real people, characters, or specific scenarios. No text in the image. Winner number 4. Callie Rogers, Teenage Millionaire, 2003. Callie Rogers was only 16 years old and working part-time at a cooperative store in Cumbria, England, for £3.60 per hour when she won £1.9 million in the UK National Lottery in 2003. She became Britain's youngest lottery millionaire overnight, transforming from a working-class teenager into a wealthy young woman who had more money than anyone in her family had ever seen. Callie's age made her win particularly newsworthy, and she was featured in newspapers and television programs across the United Kingdom. She appeared happy and excited in interviews talking about how she would use the money wisely and help her family. But Callie was too young to understand what having that much money really meant, or how to manage it responsibly without adult guidance. Within months of winning, Callie began spending money on partying, designer clothes, expensive holidays, and cosmetic surgery procedures. She bought breast implants and other cosmetic enhancements because she thought that was what wealthy people did. Callie spent hundreds of thousands of pounds on vacations to exotic locations, often bringing friends along and paying for everything. Callie bought houses for family members and gave large sums of cash to relatives who asked for help. She was generous, but also naive about how quickly people would take advantage of her willingness to share. Friends and acquaintances who had ignored Callie before she won suddenly wanted to spend time with her and always needed money for various emergencies or opportunities. The constant attention and newfound wealth changed Callie's personality. She began using cocaine and other drugs while partying in expensive clubs. Her addiction problems developed quickly because she had unlimited money to buy drugs and surround herself with people who enabled her destructive behavior. Callie spent over £250,000 on cocaine over several years. Callie dated a series of men who were interested in her money more than her as a person. She supported boyfriends who did not work and who encouraged her to spend freely on them. One relationship cost her over £100,000 before she realized the man was using her, but Callie kept repeating the same pattern with different men. She bought designer handbags that cost thousands of pounds each and would use them once before buying new ones. Callie owned dozens of expensive handbags she never used sitting in closets. Her shopping addiction, fed by unlimited funds, meant she was constantly buying things she did not need simply because she could. The thrill of spending money became more important than what she was actually buying. By 2008, Callie had attempted suicide twice due to depression and the stress of managing her diminishing fortune. She was only 21 years old, but had already experienced more trauma and lifestyle problems than most people face in a lifetime. The money that was supposed to make her happy had instead made her miserable and suicidal. Callie continued spending recklessly, even as her fortune shrank. She gave money to anyone who asked, including strangers who approached her in public. She supported friends who stopped working because they knew Callie would pay their bills. She was too kind and trusting to say no, even when people were obviously exploiting her generosity. By 2013, Callie admitted publicly that she had spent her entire £1.9 million fortune. She was broke and working again at low-wage jobs, trying to support her children. Callie had 3 kids from different relationships and was receiving government benefits to survive. The millionaire teenager was now a struggling single mother with nothing to show for her lottery win except regret. In interviews, Callie said the money ruined her life. She claimed winning at 16 was the worst thing that ever happened because she was too young to handle the responsibility and attention. Callie said if she could go back in time, she would not claim the ticket. She believed her life would have been better if she had never won and just continued working her minimum wage job. Callie tried to warn other young lottery winners to be careful and save their money instead of spending it on partying and materialistic things. She became an example of how youth and sudden wealth are a dangerous combination. Financial advisors used Callie's story to illustrate why lottery winners need professional help managing their money, especially when they are minors. By 2023, Callie was working as a healthcare assistant, earning about £18,000 per year. She was living modestly and focusing on raising her children. The £1.9 million was completely gone, spent on drugs, parties, cosmetic surgery, failed relationships, and helping people who did not deserve it. Callie Rogers proved that being the youngest millionaire is not something to celebrate when it leads to addiction, depression, exploitation, and financial ruin. Winning at 16 destroyed a decade of her life and left her with nothing but hard-earned lessons about the dangers of too much money too soon. The teenage lottery winner became a cautionary tale about why some countries do not allow minors to play lottery games. Winner number 5. Michael Carroll. The Lotto Lout. 2002. Michael Carroll was 19 years old, working as a garbage collector in Norfolk, England, earning £98 per week when he won £9.7 million in the UK National Lottery in November 2002. He became instantly famous as the youngest British jackpot winner at that time. Michael seemed thrilled during his initial press conferences and talked about buying his mother a house and enjoying his fortune. But Michael quickly earned the nickname Lotto Lout from British tabloid newspapers because of his outrageous behavior and reckless spending. Within weeks of winning, Michael was arrested for drug possession and criminal damage. He seemed determined to prove he was still a working-class troublemaker despite being a multimillionaire. Michael wore an electronic ankle tag to one of his early lottery press events because he was under house arrest. Michael bought a mansion in Norfolk that he called Grange and spent hundreds of thousands of pounds turning it into a party house. He installed a demolition derby track in the backyard where he smashed expensive cars for entertainment. Michael would buy Range Rovers and Mercedes and deliberately crash them into each other while drunk. He destroyed millions of pounds worth of vehicles purely for fun. The parties at Michael's mansion were legendary for all the wrong reasons. Hundreds of people would show up, including many who had never met Michael but heard about the free drugs and alcohol. Michael spent an estimated £400,000 on crack cocaine over several years. He was arrested multiple times for drug possession and would show up to court appearances still intoxicated. Michael hired prostitutes regularly and was arrested for soliciting sex workers in public. He seemed to enjoy getting arrested and seeing his name in tabloid newspapers. The negative attention fed his sense of importance. Michael believed being notorious was just as good as being famous. Every arrest made him more infamous, and he seemed proud of his reputation as Britain's worst lottery winner. His wife Sandra, whom he married before winning the lottery, divorced him in 2004, taking a large settlement. Michael continued spending money on drugs, prostitutes, parties, and destroying expensive items for entertainment. He bought dozens of luxury cars and either crashed them deliberately or had them stolen because he left them unlocked with keys in the ignition. Michael gave money to anyone who asked without thinking about consequences. He claimed he gave away nearly £3 million to friends and family members. Many people took advantage of Michael's generosity and stupidity. He would hand out thousands of pounds in cash at parties to complete strangers. Michael seemed to have no concept of the value of money, despite growing up poor. By 2006, Michael had been arrested and charged with dozens of criminal offenses including drug possession, assault, and criminal damage. He became more famous for his arrests than for his lottery win. Courts fined him repeatedly, but Michael just paid the fines with cash and continued his destructive behavior. Money removed any real consequences for his actions. Michael spent £500,000 on jewelry, including gold chains and expensive watches, that he would lose or give away while intoxicated. He had no idea where most of his expensive possessions ended up. Friends and acquaintances stole from him constantly, but Michael was too drunk or high to notice or care. His mansion was vandalized repeatedly by people he invited to parties. In 2010, Michael's mansion was repossessed by banks because he had stopped paying the mortgage despite still having lottery money. He claimed he forgot to pay bills and did not understand how mortgages worked. Michael moved into a smaller house and continued partying and using drugs. His health was deteriorating from years of substance abuse. By 2011, Michael was completely broke, having spent his entire £9.7 million fortune in less than 9 years. He took a job working at a cookie factory, earning £204 per week, roughly twice what he earned as a garbage collector before winning. Michael told newspapers he was happier working than he had been as a millionaire. In interviews, Michael admitted he wasted his lottery fortune on drugs and stupid decisions. He said the money destroyed his life and turned him into someone he did not recognize. Michael claimed he had more real friends when he was poor than when he was rich. The people who surrounded him as a millionaire only wanted his money and disappeared as soon as it was gone. Michael became a symbol of lottery disaster in the United Kingdom. His story was used to scare other lottery winners into being responsible with their money. Financial advisors would show Michael's example as what not to do when you suddenly become wealthy. The Lotto Lout name followed him forever and defined his public image. By 2020, Michael was still working low-wage jobs and living modestly. The mansion, the cars, the jewelry, and the £9.7 million were all gone. The only things remaining were his criminal record, his damaged health from drug abuse, and his infamous reputation. Michael Carroll proved that being young, reckless, and stupid is a dangerous combination when you suddenly have millions of pounds to waste on destructive behavior. Winner number 6. Vivian Nicholson. Spend, spend, spend. 1961. Vivian Nicholson was a working-class housewife from Yorkshire, England, when her husband Keith won £152,000 in the football pools in September 1961. That amount equals approximately £4 million in today's money accounting for inflation. It was an enormous fortune, especially for a family that had been struggling to pay bills and living in a small council house. When reporters asked Vivian what she planned to do with the money, she famously declared, "I'm going to spend, spend, spend." Her quote became legendary and would haunt her for the rest of her life. Vivian was not joking. She fully intended to spend every penny on the luxuries she had been denied while living in poverty. She saw the pools win as a chance to live like a movie star. Vivian immediately went on a shopping spree that shocked her small Yorkshire town. She bought expensive fur coats, designer dresses, jewelry, and luxury handbags. She traded in her husband's modest car for a pink Chevrolet Impala imported from America, which was outrageous for 1960s England. Vivian wanted to show everyone in town that she was now rich and important. The couple moved from their council house into an expensive mansion. Vivian redecorated with no regard for cost, ordering custom furniture and artwork. She hired interior designers and spent tens of thousands of pounds making the house look like something from a magazine. Every room had to be perfect regardless of the price. Vivian's spending was compulsive and endless. But Vivian and Keith had no understanding of taxes or how to manage their sudden wealth. They spent money faster than they earned interest on it. The British tax authorities came after them for huge amounts of unpaid taxes on the pool's winnings. Vivian had spent the money without setting aside anything for the government's share. The tax bill was devastating. Keith died in a car accident in 1965, just 4 years after they won. Vivian inherited what remained of the fortune, but it was far less than the original amount. She had already spent most of the money and owed taxes. Keith's death sent Vivian into a spiral of depression and even more reckless spending. She used shopping as therapy to deal with her grief. Vivian remarried multiple times after Keith died, and each marriage ended badly, often because of money problems. Husbands would spend her remaining funds, or she would spend lavishly on them and then divorce. The pattern repeated several times. Vivian could not seem to find stability in her personal life or her finances. By 1971, Vivian had spent every pound from the pool's win. She was broke and working low-wage jobs again, just like before they won. The fur coats, jewelry, cars, and mansion were all gone. Vivian had nothing to show for the £152,000 except memories and regret. She had literally spent it all just like she promised. Vivian struggled with poverty for the rest of her life. She worked as a waitress and in other service jobs, barely surviving. The woman who once wore designer clothes and drove a pink Cadillac was now taking buses and shopping at charity stores. The contrast between her brief life of luxury and her long return to poverty was stark and sad. In 1977, Vivian's life story was made into a musical called Spend, 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 which became popular in London's West End. The musical portrayed Vivian's rise and fall with sympathy, but also showed her reckless spending and poor decisions. Vivian attended the opening night and watched actors portray her mistakes on stage. She earned some money from the musical rights, but not enough to escape poverty. Vivian wrote an autobiography, also called Spend, 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 in which she reflected on her lottery disaster. She admitted she was foolish and materialistic. Vivian said she thought money would solve all her problems, but instead, it created new ones. She warned other lottery winners not to make the same mistakes she did. Vivian Nicholson died in 2015 at age 79, having lived most of her life in poverty after her brief years of wealth. Her famous quote, "Spend, spend, spend," became a warning about lottery winners who waste their fortunes. Vivian's story was taught in financial literacy classes as an example of what happens when you prioritize spending over saving. The £152,000 pool's win should have set Vivian up for life if managed properly. Instead, it provided a few years of luxury, followed by decades of regret. Vivian proved that you can spend any amount of money if you are determined enough and foolish enough. Her legacy became a cautionary tale about the dangers of materialism and the importance of financial planning, even when you think you have more money than you could ever spend. Winner number 7. Suzanne Mullins. Borrowed Future, 1993. Suzanne Mullins won $4.2 million in the Virginia lottery in 1993, which would be paid out in annual installments over 20 years. She was thrilled to finally have financial security after years of struggling with money problems. Suzanne believed the lottery win meant she would never have to worry about bills again and could live comfortably for the rest of her life. But Suzanne made a critical mistake almost immediately after winning. Instead of living on the annual payments and budgeting carefully, she borrowed money against her future lottery payments. Companies that specialize in buying lottery annuities offered Suzanne large lump sums of cash in exchange for rights to her future checks. Suzanne took these deals multiple times, effectively selling her future for immediate spending money. Suzanne was already deep in debt before winning the lottery and hoped the jackpot would solve her financial problems. She owed money on credit cards, medical bills, and personal loans. Instead of using her annual lottery payments to slowly pay off these debts, Suzanne borrowed heavily and spent the money on current expenses and helping family members who also had money problems. The problem with selling future lottery payments is that you receive far less than the actual value. Companies that buy annuities pay maybe 50 cents on the dollar because they are taking risk and need to profit. So Suzanne was trading future payments, worth hundreds of thousands, for immediate cash worth much less. She was destroying her long-term financial security for short-term spending money. Suzanne also faced a major lawsuit from her ex-husband's family, who claimed she owed them money for loans they had made before she won the lottery. The family filed suit demanding repayment plus interest. The legal battle dragged on for years, costing Suzanne tens of thousands in attorney fees. Eventually, she was ordered to pay a large settlement that consumed more of her borrowed lottery money. Medical problems created additional financial strain for Suzanne. She needed expensive treatments for health conditions and did not have adequate insurance. The medical bills piled up quickly, reaching hundreds of thousands of dollars. Suzanne borrowed more money against her future lottery payments to pay doctors and hospitals. Each time she borrowed, she had less future income to rely on. By 2004, Suzanne had sold or borrowed against so much of her lottery annuity that she had almost no future payments left. The $4.2 million jackpot was effectively gone, even though she was still receiving small payments. Most of the money was going directly to the companies that had bought her future annuity rights. Suzanne got little or nothing from each payment. Creditors continued pursuing Suzanne for unpaid debts. She could not pay them because her lottery income was already pledged to other companies. Suzanne filed for bankruptcy protection, trying to stop the lawsuits and collection efforts. The bankruptcy revealed just how badly she had mismanaged the lottery winnings. She had massive debts and virtually no assets or income. The court-appointed bankruptcy trustee was shocked to discover that Suzanne had won millions but was now broke and deep in debt. The trustee tried to recover some money for creditors, but there was little left to collect. Suzanne's lottery annuity rights had been sold, and the proceeds were long spent. She had squandered a multi-million-dollar windfall in just over a decade. Suzanne's health continued deteriorating, and she needed more medical care that she could not afford. She relied on charity care and government assistance programs for health care. The lottery winner, who should have been financially secure, was instead dependent on public aid. The irony of winning millions and ending up on government assistance was not lost on anyone. In interviews, Suzanne expressed regret about how she handled her lottery winnings. She admitted that borrowing against future payments was a terrible mistake that destroyed her financial security. Suzanne said she should have lived within her means on the annual payments and not tried to get large lump sums that came with huge costs. She wished she had sought financial advice before making deals with annuity buyers. Suzanne Mullins became an example of how borrowing against lottery winnings is one of the fastest ways to lose everything. Financial advisors use her story to warn lottery winners about the dangers of selling future payments for immediate cash. The companies that buy lottery annuities make enormous profits, while winners like Suzanne end up broke. Suzanne spent her later years living modestly on whatever small income she could earn or receive from assistance programs. The $4.2 million lottery win was completely gone, leaving her worse off than before she won. The debt, legal problems, and health issues that the lottery should have solved instead became worse because Suzanne made poor financial decisions early on and could never recover from them. Winner number 8. Lara and Roger Griffiths. Mansion Fire, 2005. Lara and Roger Griffiths won £1.8 million in the UK National Lottery in 2005. They seemed like a stable couple who would handle their winnings responsibly. Roger was an IT technician and Lara worked in education. They were middle-class professionals with good jobs who just wanted to improve their lives with the lottery money. The couple decided to buy their dream home, a beautiful mansion in West Yorkshire with extensive grounds and luxurious amenities. They spent hundreds of thousands of pounds purchasing the property and hundreds of thousands more renovating it to their exact specifications. Lara and Roger wanted everything perfect in their new mansion, from the kitchen appliances to the landscaping, but the couple made a critical error that would prove catastrophic. While renovating the mansion, they let their home insurance policy lapse. Roger later said they were too focused on the renovation work and simply forgot to maintain the insurance coverage. It was an oversight that seemed minor at the time, but would destroy them financially. In January 2010, less than 5 years after winning the lottery, the Griffiths mansion caught fire. The blaze started in the middle of the night and spread rapidly through the house. Lara, Roger, and their 2 young children barely escaped with their lives. They fled the burning mansion, wearing only their pajamas in freezing winter weather. The family stood outside watching flames consume their dream home. Firefighters battled the blaze for hours, but the mansion was destroyed. Everything inside was lost, including all their possessions, family heirlooms, and irreplaceable personal items. The fire investigation determined it started accidentally from an electrical fault in the renovation work. It was a terrible accident, but one that insurance should have covered. Except Lara and Roger had no insurance. The mansion and everything in it was a total loss worth well over £1 million, and they would recover nothing. The couple was devastated emotionally and financially. They had invested most of their lottery winnings into the mansion and renovation. The fire wiped out their fortune in a single night. To make matters worse, Lara and Roger's marriage began falling apart under the stress of losing their home and money. They fought constantly about whose fault it was that the insurance lapsed. The blame and recrimination destroyed their relationship. By 2013, the couple divorced, splitting whatever little money remained from their lottery win. Lara ended up working as a teaching assistant, again trying to support herself and the children. Roger returned to IT work. Both were living in modest accommodations, far from the luxury mansion they once owned. The £1.8 million lottery win was completely gone, most of it destroyed in the fire that insurance would have covered. The Griffiths family became a cautionary tale about the importance of insurance, especially when you own expensive property. Financial advisors use their story to illustrate how a simple mistake, like forgetting to renew insurance, can destroy a lottery fortune. The couple won millions, but ended up with less than they started with because of one critical oversight. Lara later said in interviews that they should have hired a financial advisor to manage their money and remind them about important things like insurance. She admitted they got overconfident after winning and thought nothing could go wrong. The fire proved how quickly disaster can strike when you are not properly protected. The Griffiths mansion fire disaster showed that lottery winners can lose everything even without gambling or drugs or con artists. Sometimes all it takes is forgetting to pay an insurance bill and having bad luck with an electrical fire. Lara and Roger lost their fortune, their marriage, and their dream home because of a single administrative mistake combined with terrible timing. Winner number 9. Jeanette Lee, generous to a fault, 1993. Jeanette Lee was a Korean immigrant working at a wig shop in St. Louis, Missouri, when she won $18 million in the Illinois lottery in 1993. She chose to take annual payments instead of a lump sum, which seemed like a smart conservative decision. Jeanette appeared in early interviews as a sensible woman who would use the money wisely to help her family and community. Jeanette was known for being extremely generous and charitable. She believed in giving back to her community and helping people in need. This generosity seemed admirable at first. Jeanette donated large sums to political causes supporting education and civil rights. She gave money to Washington University in St. Louis for scholarships. She contributed to her local church and various charitable organizations. But Jeanette's generosity had no limits or planning. She gave money to anyone who asked, without investigating whether they were legitimate charities or con artists. Jeanette wrote checks for tens of thousands of dollars to organizations she knew nothing about just because someone asked. She funded political candidates who lost their elections, leaving her donations completely wasted. Jeanette also gave enormous amounts of money to friends and family members. If a relative said they needed money for a business or medical bills or education, Janet would write a check immediately without asking questions. She supported extended family members who stopped working because they knew Janet would pay their expenses. Her inability to say no made her an easy target. By the late 1990s, Jeanette had donated or given away millions of dollars in just a few years. Her annual lottery payments were substantial, but she was spending far more than she received. Jeanette borrowed money using her future lottery payments as collateral to fund more charitable giving. She was literally going into debt to give money away. Jeanette's generous nature was exploited by people who saw her as an unlimited ATM machine. Con artists approached her with fake sob stories and business opportunities. Jeanette gave money to almost everyone without investigating their claims. She wanted to believe she was helping people, but in reality, she was being robbed by clever thieves. The problem compounded when Jeanette began having gambling issues. She started visiting casinos and playing slot machines. Jeanette became addicted to gambling and began spending hundreds of thousands of dollars at casinos in addition to her charitable giving. The combination of excessive generosity and gambling addiction was financially devastating. By 2001, Jeanette had depleted her lottery fortune and accumulated enormous debts. She owed money to the IRS for unpaid taxes on her gambling winnings. Jeanette owed creditors who had loaned her money against future lottery payments. She had pledged years of future payments to various people and companies, leaving her with almost no income. In 2001, Jeanette filed for bankruptcy, listing only $700 in assets against over $2.5 million in debts. The bankruptcy revealed the extent of her financial collapse. Jeanette had won $18 million just 8 years earlier, but was now completely broke with massive debts. It was one of the fastest lottery fortune losses in American history. The bankruptcy trustee tried to understand how someone could win $18 million and lose it so quickly. The answer was simple. Jeanette gave it away. She donated millions to charities and political causes. She gave millions to family and friends. She lost hundreds of thousands gambling. She had been generous to everyone except herself and her own financial security. Jeanette's political donations had reached into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, including large contributions to Democratic Party candidates and organizations. While political giving is legal, it provided Janet no return. She was funding other people's campaigns while destroying her own finances. The politicians took her money, but could not help her when she went broke. Washington University benefited from Janet's lottery when receiving large donations that funded scholarships. After her bankruptcy, the university faced criticism for accepting so much money from someone who clearly could not afford the donations. The university defended itself by saying Jeanette seemed wealthy and insisted on giving. They had no way of knowing she was bankrupting herself. Jeanette Lee spent her later years living in poverty and working low-wage jobs. The wig shop worker who briefly became a multimillionaire was back to struggling financially. The $18 million was completely gone, with nothing to show except the satisfaction of having helped others. But that satisfaction did not pay Janet's bills or provide for her own retirement. Janet's story became a lesson about the dangers of being too generous with lottery winnings. Financial advisors tell lottery winners they cannot give money to everyone who asks. There must be limits and budgets, even for charitable giving. Janet's unlimited generosity destroyed her financially and showed that you can literally give away millions of dollars if your kindness exceeds your judgment. Winner number 10. Sharon Tirabassi, Bus Riding Millionaire, 2004. Sharon Tirabassi was a single mother living in subsidized housing in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, when she won 10.5 million Canadian dollars in the lottery in 2004. She was 35 years old and had been struggling financially while raising her children alone. The massive jackpot seemed like it would solve all her problems and provide security for her family forever. Sharon quit her job immediately after winning and began spending money on everything she had been denied while living in poverty. She bought a large house in an expensive neighborhood. Sharon purchased luxury cars for herself and gave cars to friends and family members. She took expensive vacations to exotic locations, often bringing extended family along and paying for everything. Sharon was extremely generous with her newfound wealth. She gave large sums of money to friends who asked for help. She supported family members who needed financial assistance. Sharon threw lavish parties and gave expensive gifts. She wanted to share her good fortune with everyone around her and make up for years of being unable to afford nice things. But Sharon had no budget or financial plan. She spent money impulsively on whatever caught her attention. Sharon would see something expensive and buy it immediately without considering whether she needed it or could afford it long term. Designer clothes, jewelry, home furnishings, and entertainment expenses added up quickly. Sharon's spending was constant and thoughtless. Sharon also made poor investment decisions with professional advisors who convinced her to put money into risky business ventures that failed. She lost hundreds of thousands of dollars on investments that promised high returns but delivered only losses. Sharon did not understand finance well enough to evaluate whether the investments made sense. She trusted people she should have been skeptical of. Within a few years, Sharon had spent millions of dollars with nothing of lasting value to show for it. The luxury cars depreciated rapidly. The expensive house required costly maintenance she had not budgeted for. The vacations and parties were wonderful experiences, but left no financial legacy. Sharon's money was evaporating, and she did not realize how quickly until it was almost too late. By 2009, Sharon's lottery fortune was substantially depleted. She had spent most of the $10.5 million in just 5 years. Sharon sold her expensive house and moved to a more modest home. She sold the luxury cars and bought practical vehicles. Sharon started working again to support her family because the lottery money was running out. Sharon made one smart decision that saved her from complete financial disaster. Before spending all her money, she set up trust funds for her 6 children that they could access when they turned adult age. Sharon put aside money that she legally could not touch, ensuring her kids would have something even if she spent everything else. This decision showed Sharon cared about her children's future even while being reckless with her own finances. By 2013, Sharon admitted publicly that she had spent her entire lottery fortune. She was working part-time jobs and riding the public bus to get around. The millionaire who once owned luxury cars was back to using public transportation, just like before she won. Sharon had come full circle, returning to the working-class lifestyle she briefly escaped. In interviews, Sharon expressed no regrets about how she spent the money. She said she had wonderful experiences and helped a lot of people. Sharon claimed the lottery win taught her that money is not the most important thing in life, and that family and experiences matter more than material possessions. She seemed at peace with her financial situation. Critics argued that Sharon could have kept her fortune if she had been more responsible. Financial experts calculated that with proper management, $10.5 million should generate several $100,000 in annual interest alone. Sharon could have lived very comfortably forever, just on investment returns without touching the principal. Instead, she spent the money faster than it could earn interest. Sharon's return to riding the bus became symbolic of her lottery disaster. Newspapers ran photos of the former millionaire waiting at bus stops and used the images to illustrate how quickly lottery fortunes can disappear. Sharon became a cautionary tale about lottery winners who spend without planning and end up back where they started. The fact that Sharon set up trust funds for her children showed she was not completely irresponsible. She ensured her kids would benefit from the lottery win, even though she personally spent everything. The children would receive hundreds of thousands of dollars each when they reached adulthood, giving them opportunities Sharon never had. Sharon Tirabassi proved that you can spend $10 million in just a few years if you have no budget, give money to everyone who asks, make poor investments, and buy expensive things that depreciate quickly. Her story showed that lottery winnings without financial discipline lead right back to poverty. Sharon's willingness to share her story helped educate other lottery winners about the importance of planning and budgeting, even when you think you have more money than you could ever spend.